The porch boards gave a low groan. Not loud enough to startle. Just enough to make Colter Hayes turn his head. There she was. Lorna May stood framed in the last golden slant of sun, one hand gripping the post like she'd forgotten how to walk upright. Her blue dress clung wet to one side, and darker still near the hem, blood, or something trying to hide it. Her braid hung loose, dusty, frayed. She didn't meet his eyes. Colter didn't move. A man who had spent most of his life tending things, horses, fences, silence. He knew when not to rush. Her left foot dragged slightly as she stepped inside. That limp wasn't new. Born wrong in the ankle, folks said. She'd worked through it her whole life without a word. But tonight, her gait was off. Labored. Offbeat. Like a hymn sung in the wrong key. She didn't speak. Just reached for the kettle with a stiff arm and filled it half full. Set it gently on the stove like it might bruise if dropped. The silence wrapped around them like wool. Colter stood near the door. He was not a man given to speech, nor to softness, but he watched her like one watches a flickering lantern on a storm's edge. Quietly, carefully. The kettle hadn't even warmed before she leaned on the counter. Just a bit. Not enough to show weakness. Just enough for him to see. She was hurt. Not tired. Not clumsy. Not foolish. Hurt. Her sleeves were rolled too high. One wrist bore the smear of a grip too tight. Her knuckles were raw. And under one eye, the faintest hue of purple, thin as lavender smoke. Still, she stirred the air with casual movements, like she hoped he wouldn't notice what her body already confessed. But Colter had seen too many colts come in limping. Too many dogs pretend not to cry. He had learned to read silence like scripture. The floor creaked beneath his step. She stiffened. "I dropped the eggs," she said finally, her voice too quick, too high. Clumsy as ever. Missed the rock. Fell some. Colter said nothing. Just stood with one hand on the back of the chair, thumb rubbing the groove worn by time. She turned then, face still composed, but her eyes were brittle. A branch too dry to bend much longer. "I'll go clean up." "No," he said, voice low. That stopped her. Not the word, but the way it dropped like an anvil. Final. Full of something unsaid. She gripped the table edge. Her shoulders tensed. Then she let go of the lie she'd been holding like breath. It was Jeb Goodwin. The name sat in the air like a stone thrown into a still pond. He followed me by the creek. Said I owed him for carrying firewood last week. Grabbed me from behind. Said. Her mouth worked around the next words. Said I didn't count the same as church girls. Colter's hands curled, slow. He didn't speak. The air between them felt charged now. Like lightning was listening. I told him no. I told him. "You don't have to," Colter said. But she did. Because saying it made it real. Made her real. He shoved me down. Took the eggs from my basket and smashed them in the dirt. She gave a soft, broken laugh. Told me to remember I was lucky anyone noticed me at all. Her voice cracked. She bit it back. There was pride in her still. Even after this. He said if I told anyone, I'd be the one punished. That no one believe a limping maid over the preacher's boy. Colter took a slow breath. Then moved. Not toward her. Just to the stove. He lifted the kettle, poured the still cool water into a chipped basin, and set it on the table with a clean rag. "Sit," he said gently. She looked at him, surprised. "Please." She did. With hands that barely trembled, he dipped the cloth and wrung it out, then knelt before her like he was praying. He dabbed gently at the dried blood near her knee. She flinched at first, then settled. "I wasn't gonna say anything," she murmured. "Thought I'd clean up. Pretend it didn't happen." Colter didn't look up. His voice, when it came, was like thunder tucked behind a mountain. "You're not pretend." And with that, she began to cry. Quietly. Like someone who didn't know how anymore. He let her. When her tears slowed, she whispered, "He left something." A button. She reached into her pocket, laid it on the table. A black wooden circle, blood-specked, carved with a tiny cross. Colter stared at it. Then he stood. The room no longer felt small. The fire crackled. The sun had slipped. The kettle began to hum. And Colter's eyes were no longer calm. The stars were sharp that night, like shattered glass thrown across the sky. Colter rode in silence, his wide shoulders hunched forward, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Behind him, Lorna sat still, wrapped in his late wife's gray shawl, her fingers clutching the fabric like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. The sheriff's office came into view just past the livery, lamplight leaking from its windows, casting crooked shadows on the dirt road. A breeze stirred the dust, carried the faint sound of laughter from inside. Colter dismounted, didn't tie the horse, didn't knock. He opened the door. Sheriff Abram Knox looked up from his desk, eyes slow to adjust from drowsiness. Across the room, Jeb Goodwin leaned back in a chair, boots on the table, a smirk painted across his face like it had never known fear. "Well, look what—" Lorna stepped in behind Colter. The room shifted. Quiet pressed in. Sheriff Knox blinked. "Evenin', Colter. Something wrong?" Colter said nothing. He simply stepped aside. Lorna stood alone now, her limp more noticeable under the weight of watching eyes. She swallowed. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her gaze dropped to the floor. Jeb chuckled. "She always this shy, or just when she's lying?" Colter's jaw tightened. But he didn't speak. Not yet. Lorna looked up at the sheriff. "I was behind the church shed," she said, voice steady as she could make it. "I was gathering eggs from the baskets. He came up behind me, grabbed me, said I owed him for firewood, for his silence." Jeb snorted. "This is ridiculous." The sheriff leaned forward, expression unreadable. "You sure about what you're saying, Miss Lorna?" Lorna's lips trembled, but her voice did not. "I told him no. He pushed me down, tore the back of my dress, called me a limping beggar, said no one would believe me if I spoke." She reached into her shawl and pulled out the small object, set it carefully on the sheriff's desk. The black button, stained at the edge, still faintly warm from her palm. Jeb's laugh died in his throat. The sheriff looked from the button to Jeb. "That from your coat?" I lost it last week." "You were wearing that same coat 2 days ago at services," Colter said, voice low, final. Jeb stood too fast. "This is nonsense. She's just some half-crippled maid looking for pity." "She's the one with blood on her dress," Colter replied. Sheriff Knox rose, slow. "Jeb, I think you better come with me." "You're taking her side? Over me? My father?" "Your father ain't the law here." Knox stepped around the desk, and Jeb stepped back, hand twitching near his belt. Colter moved first. His hand found Jeb's collar, lifted him clear off his feet, and slammed him into the wall with a crack loud enough to silence God. "You put your hands on her," Colter growled, "and lied about it." Jeb's boots scrabbled against the wood floor. "I oughta." "You'll do nothing," Knox snapped, pulling out his cuffs. "Jeb Goodwin, I'm detaining you for assault and intent to harm. We'll sort it out with the judge, but until then, you're sleeping behind bars." Jeb was shackled, still snarling. "She's lying. You'll all see." Lorna flinched at the words but didn't look away. Colter released him slowly. His breathing was calm again, controlled. The sheriff led Jeb into the cell at the back. The iron door clanged shut. Lorna sank into the corner chair, hands folded in her lap, the shawl slipping from one shoulder. She looked smaller somehow, but not weak, just spent, emptied of the weight she'd been carrying. Knox returned, poured water into a tin cup, and set it beside her. "You did right coming here," he said. "Might not be easy, but it was right." She nodded. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." "I wouldn't have," the sheriff admitted. "Not before tonight." Not before he walked in beside you. She looked up at Colter then. There was no speech in her, no thanks. Just a look. Deep. Unspoken. A thank you pressed into breath. Outside, the wind stirred again. Coyotes cried in the distance like they knew something had shifted in the bones of the earth. Later, back at the ranch, the sky had turned soft with clouds. Colter unsaddled the horse in silence. Lorna stood by the porch, staring out at the dark. The shawl trailed like smoke behind her. "Do you believe in redemption?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "I believe some folks are worth more than what the world ever gave him credit for." She smiled faintly. "He told me I'd never be worth believing." Colter stepped up beside her. Didn't touch her. Just stood close enough to be steady. "You didn't need to be believed," he said. "You needed to be heard." The final line came as softly as the dawn rising behind the hills. And now the whole town's listening. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.